It's no secret that balancing in TDX is a little wonky sometimes. Towers feel either too powerful or not powerful enough at times, and sometimes it feels like they don't really know how to balance them correctly. I'm not one to sit here and go, this needs to be buffed, this needs to be nerfed. They can do whatever they like with that. However, I do think that there is one particular system of the game that they could completely revamp, and it would overall just completely change things in a good way. Hello everybody, my name is Vendetta, and today I'm proposing to you my idea for a rework of the ignore resistance system. That's right, so one of TDX's core mechanics is having resistances. To prevent only the best and the most cost-efficient towers from succeeding in every game mode, enemies have this little thing called resistances. And there are damage types. If you've played TDX before, I don't really have to explain this, so I'll keep it short. Towers that shoot bullets are weak to enemies that have bullet resistance. Explosive towers are weak to explosive resistance, and so on and so forth. And that's a good system. I like it, you know? It prevents one tower from just completely obliterating everything. It provides more of a strategic side to the game rather than just dumping down the most cost-efficient towers and just calling it a day. But there's one little problem with this. The resistance side is fine, the enemies are doing good, but the tower side of this is not good. And the reason I say that is there's one big term, one big trait for upgrades that gets used sometimes in a lot of different towers, and it is just ridiculous. It is something that does not need to exist, and it just hurts the balance team. It just makes it hard to balance things. Of course, what I'm talking about is the ignore damage resistant trait. You know, that thing that John gets, Jet Trooper, Golden Juggernaut, Helicopter, all those towers. But why? Why, Vendetta? Why is it such a problem? Well, in this system, having ignore resistance on a tower is either you ignore 100% of all resistances and they're no longer a matter to that tower whatsoever, or they don't ignore resistance and they do have to worry about it and it feels underpowered. I'll try and word it like this. Towers have two sides. It's either they're very powerful and good cost efficiency, but they don't have ignore resistance, or they do have ignore resistance, but they feel weaker and less cost efficient. But why is that? Why do towers have to be treated like that? Well, it's like I said, that ignore resistance trait is very powerful, and it's just a big thing that just can't be thrown around. It has to be handled delicately. Some towers having 100% resistance is actually completely fine, but some towers like XWM are a little bit wonky with it. And there's also some debates about other towers that should have it or shouldn't have it, like bottom path railgunner should have it, or like artillery could have it on top path or something. You know, you get the idea. Well, I'm here to propose a system that could both completely change this system and make it not feel so two-sided and kind of wonky to balance, while also completely opening the doors for tower rebalances of all kinds. Yeah, every tower could benefit from this, and the ones that do need to be nerfed can finally be nerfed. And it's really easy too. It's really simple, and I'm going to jump into it right now. So, my new system I propose is, like I said, it's very simple, but I have thought about it, and it does make a lot of things so much easier for the balance team, and it would just make towers so much more balanced. I think that this is a good idea. So, here's the system. Instead of either all or nothing being, ignore 100% resistance or ignore 0% resistance, I think that instead of just having that ignore damage resistant trait, it should be ignore X amount of damage trait. Okay, I kind of worded it horribly, but stick with me here. Think of it like this. We'll use top path XWM as an example. XWM turret gets ignore resistance at level 5 on the top path. Some people think that that's too late and it makes it XWM a bad tower, but other people think that if it was on level 4, it's kind of overpowered. Well, why can't we go halvesies? We can split the number into smaller numbers between 0 and 100% rather than it being ignore nothing or ignore all of it. So for example, level 4 XWM turret could have ignore 50% bullet resistance or ignore 60% bullet resistance. And then later on at level 5, it could be upped to 80 or 90 or 100, whatever they want to do. And that was just an example. I don't think that's how it should be, but just bear with me, okay? That's just an example to try and explain it. And by ignore 50%, ignore 60%, how that works is, say you have an enemy with 100% bullet resistance, and say I have a little sentry that has ignore 50% bullet resistance. It's quite simple. 100 minus 50 is 50, which means that to this sentry, this enemy only has 50% bullet resistance, and therefore the sentry does half its DPS to that enemy. Makes sense? I hope so, because like I said, this system could balance so many different things, it's actually crazy. Towers that do need ignore resistance, but 100% would be too much, they can finally get some buffs. Towers that have the ignore resistance trait, but it's too strong, they can finally be nerfed and made into a good place where it isn't completely garbage by not having it at all, but they can also, still fight with some kind of resistance. So for example, Bottom Path Warship. You guys might remember that Bottom Path Warship actually did have ignore resistance for a while there during Halloween. Well, that was definitely overpowered, but it does kind of fit for it to have ignore resistance, so maybe you could have like ignore 20% or ignore 30% resistance, something to help it out just a little bit. And things like Max Bottom Path Juggernaut, say they could have like 10% or 20%, they have huge DPS, but they have no kind of ignore, so it could help just a little bit if they had just something to help them do a bit more damage. Bottom Path Railgunner at level 5. I honestly think this guy should have ignore resistance anyways, but if we're going with this system, it could be something like 70%, 80% ignore. Something high, he deserves it. Maybe something like Slammer. Slammer on the top path feels like it should have some kind of ignore melee resistance, but all of it would be just too much. You could have maybe ignore 30% or ignore 40%. See, you get the idea. It's something that doesn't have to be completely overpowered. It can just be a little something that can help towers that kind of need it, or just go where it makes more sense. Overall, this system just feels like it would work way better for balancing. I do think it would be a bit harder to understand for new players rather than just having the ignore resistance be all or nothing. However, the game desperately needs to do something about that because, like I said, just all or nothing with 100% resistance or ignore nothing is it's just too heavy of a term to throw around. You can't just slap that on a tower and just balance it around that completely. It just feels boring. But with this system, it just makes towers have so many new opportunities to get their way into the meta and get their way to be useful in some way. We could give Ghost a little bit of ignore resistance, like 10% or 20% on the bottom path. Golden Ranger, my boy, he can make a comeback. Max level can get back its ignore resistance, but it could only be like 50%. Flame Trooper, John, Jet Trooper, Machine Gunner, Laser Gunner, Mine Layer, Missile Trooper, Operator. I can go on and on and on and just list all the different towers that could be so good with this trait and just make so much more sense. But overall, I feel like it's going to take too long. I feel like if I just go through everything, this video is going to be like half an hour to an hour long. So instead, I'll ask you, what do you think? What do you think of this system? All the numbers I said in this video for examples of towers are not like set in stone, so don't take it as like a serious number. They're just like to show what I think could be in the game. So you can give me like different numbers if you'd like in the comments, but overall I'm more focused on just what the system actually is itself rather than the numbers I gave. I think this is a good system that would just definitely make the game a lot easier to balance for the dev team, but also just feel a lot more fair on our end. Let me know what you guys think though in the comments, because I am curious. I am curious what you guys think of this. I have thought long and hard about this system, and I actually really, really like it, and I think I would prefer it over the current just all or nothing system, as I've called it. But yeah, that's going to be all for this video. Let me know again what you think of this proposal in the comments. I'm pretty proud of it. I actually think that this is going to be like way beneficial for the dev team to think about. It's so simple, they would probably have to dedicate an entire update to doing that, to be fair though. Lots of balance changes for basically every tower in the game, and they would have to be on the lookout for balance changes in the future, but that's okay. I think that this is something that I would want an entire update for if that's what it meant. It just seems like it would work entirely. I think it would work so well. The game could be so much more balanced. It'd be so much more fun to use towers that feel weak now. But yeah, I will quit rambling. That's tonight's video. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you like this video, give it a like, and we'll see you next time on the TDX channel. My name is Vendetta. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye!